Hi, and welcome to Bible Walkthrough. This is Wes Warner,
I'm Adam Ayers.
and we are going to look at Jesus praising somebody for their dishonesty.
So in Luke 16, we have a very long parable here that is a story about dishonesty. Let's just read it and then we'll unpack it for you. He also said to his disciples, "There was a certain rich man who had a steward, and an accusation was brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. So he called him and said to him, 'What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be steward.' Then the steward said within himself, 'What shall I do? For my master is taking the stewardship away from me. I cannot dig, I'm ashamed to beg. I've resolved what to do, that when I'm put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses.' So he called every one of his master's debtors to him, and said to the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' And he said, 100 measures of oil. So he said to him, 'Take your bill, and sit down quickly, and write 50. Then he said to another, 'And how much do you owe?' So he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, 'Take your bill, and write 80. So the master commended the unjust steward, because he had dealt shrewdly. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by unrighteous mammon, that when you fail, they may receive you into an everlasting home. He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much, and he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in what is another man's, who will give you what is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon."
The person who submitted this says that they have never heard this passage preached on without the preacher saying, clearly, Luke is not saying, or clearly Jesus is not saying that dishonesty is a good thing, or you fill in the blank there. And his question is, why is it clear he's not praising the servant?
I think this is one of those situations where the sociocultural backgrounds and milieu, the situation of the text, is very important to pay attention to, as well as the structures of the text itself. And it requires a little bit closer reading. We tend to focus later on at the complement, and we should really focus at the beginning. If we look at the beginning, it says, "There was a certain rich man who had a steward, and an accusation was brought to him that this man was wasting his goods." Note, it doesn't say that he found out that the steward was wasting the goods. It says an accusation was brought to him. So in other words, this fellow, the master, is embedded in gossip. And someone comes and accuses him to the steward. And then it says, he called the man and said to him, "What is this I hear about you? Give account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be steward." So he makes a summary judgment without having an account of the stewardship. He says, you can no longer be a steward, so give me an account. So the steward is already accused by gossip, condemned, and thrown out. He's done. He's fired on hearsay. So it's interesting. So of course he says, all I know how to do is to be an accountant and a steward. I can't be a physical worker. I'm not a manual laborer. I don't know what to do, and I'm not going to be a beggar. Well, I'm in the situation of having been accused of fraud. I may as well do it, because I've already been condemned of it. So he calls those creditors in and makes the books match the accusation of fraud. He's been accused of wasting the goods, and now he says, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to waste the goods because I've already been condemned of it. In the hall of gossip, the town gossip, he's already been accused. There's no evidence, it says, but he makes the evidence fit the accusation, which is an interesting trick. Now, there's a second trick in this, that he calls each one of these creditors in, or each one of the debtors rather, in. And he says, so what's your bill? Oh, 100, write 50, write 80. When it comes to gossip, when those debtors go back out into the community, back out into the village, the situation, and they hear that he's been put out of the stewardship, each one is going to think, that's because of me. That's because of our little hidden interaction. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I don't want this to come back on me. This guy has something on me. Because this guy now has an honor claim on each one who participated in the fraud. That he can say, it's because of what the favor I did to you that I got kicked out. So what he does is he involves everyone who's been gossiping in the problem in a way that each one will think, I don't want to be exposed as the cause of this problem, because everyone knows that that master is my friend or my worker in business. If it comes out, then that master is going to know I defrauded him. And so it silences everyone. Because no one can say, that was that 50 that I took. So if everyone's a participant, now everyone's liable in the gossip. So he silences everyone's gossip by involving everyone in the accusation. So that when he's kicked out, he can just say, I got kicked out of that stewardship for fraud. Fraud, you remember? So I wouldn't want that to come out about what happened with that fraud. Would you? No. I need a job. And each one would be obliged to take him into their own house and cover him to silence the accusations. This whole thing is going on, accusations of fraud and gossip in the situation, in the commercial situation. So then Jesus says, the steward or the master comes back to the steward and says, you're pretty smart. You're pretty smart. I accused you and condemned you of it, and then you made it happen. And there's nothing else that can be done to you. And the master really has to say, it's my own fault because I condemned you of fraud before you gave an account. And now the accounting matches my accusation. All you've done is shown that my accusation is right. But I know what you've done, and no one can talk about it. And you don't get dishonored, you get favors at my cost. So he says, you were pretty shrewd in that. And Jesus' point is, what comes into our hands now, money that's in our stewardship, we ought to use rightly to buy favors of God. To say, I'm going to be involved with you, with the stuff I have. I better take a loss on my things, and I better be shrewd about this so that I can make favors with heavenly people. He says, get involved, involve God in your stuff. He says, be shrewd about what comes into your hands. Do what's in your power. There is a knife at your throat. So your life is going to end. He says, do what you have at hand. Use what you have at hand to get yourself in God's favor so that God will take you into his house. Be shrewd. Because this guy is desperate. He says, I'm desperate. I will do anything. I'm already bankrupt. I'm already denigrated. I have no honor left. I am desperate. I'm going to do, what can I do? I'm going to do whatever is in my hands to do. And Jesus says, be that desperate. Be that desperate. Use whatever is in your hands and use it as shrewdly as you can to buy some favor with God. That's what I read here.
Wow. You definitely laid that out, Adam. That's interesting. I don't think I've looked at it that way before. When I read this, it was confusing for me, and I looked up in my Bible footnote, and it said that the master wasn't commending the manager for being dishonest because he was firing the guy for being dishonest. He wasn't happy that he was dishonest, he was commending the guy for being shrewd
Yes.
in the middle of it all. And I think the point of it is like what you said, that God wants us to use money, not dishonestly. I mean, that's why the guy was being fired for dishonesty. So I don't see that as like a promotion of dishonesty, but in a shrewd way, to use money shrewdly to expand God's kingdom. And he qualifies it. He's like, not to serve money, but to use money to serve God. I mean, you can't send missionaries around the world. You can't buy churches. You can't provide meals. You can't buy homes for people without money. So we need money to do those things, but make sure your heart is towards God and you're using the money for his kingdom. Kind of like a businessman could come to church and use religious people to make money if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
You can still go to church and have money as your number one. You can still go to God and use money for him. The opposite is also true. You can be 100% for God and use money for his kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what Jesus is saying here.
Yeah.
And not to get those confused.
Yeah. Yeah. That's Jesus' point. If you haven't been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you your own? And the point is stewardship. All that comes into our hands is the Lord's. And he says, all of this stuff is really mine. Let's see how you use it. And if you are really shrewd with it, I'll give you something that's yours. But right now, you are an agent. You treat that, whatever is in your hands, as something to be used. Mm-hmm. Treat it as a tool for something. Mm-hmm. And that goes with the parable of the talents. It's very congruent with the parable of the talents. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can't deal with the talents here.
No.
Maybe we'll deal with the talents some other time. So, use your money wisely. Wisely would be for the Lord.
That's right.
I'm Adam Ayers.
Wes Warner.
And we will see you next text and next time on Bible Walkthrough. Thanks for tuning in.